All of this is the background information in a very condensed version of the concepts, the requisite concepts needed to understand human rights, so that when we finally do get into a discourse on human rights, we have a more solid historical grounding and philosophical grounding in the concepts needed to discuss human rights. So two things. First thing, natural laws, which we've seen before. I'll make more sense of that in a second. And the second thing are natural rights. Natural laws and natural rights. What we see are natural laws for Locke are generally applicable. Right? When we're talking about natural laws, we're saying that they're natural laws generally applicable. And when we talk about positive laws, right, positive laws are applicable via convention. I'll talk about this in a second. All right. Let's make a sense of this idea. If we talk about, I'm going to sort of highlight this, natural laws versus positive laws. Natural laws being generally applicable aren't laws that are specific to sociocultural, especially socio-political conventions, right? So if we talk about positive laws, we can talk about laws that are specifically instituted. I don't want to get too technical, but remember, I said I'm going to start ghetto at first, and then I'm going to gradually get a little deeper. It's at this point that I get a little bit deeper, just a little bit. You can think of, let's start with the easier one, positive laws. You can think of the idea of positive laws as proceeding, coming as a consequence of, proceeding from, and I'll write this down, but proceeding from our being contracted into society. Okay, I'll say that again, and then I'll explain what that means, because I know that's conceptually a little deeper. Right? We can think of, and I'll actually write it down. We can think of positive laws as a right or proceeding, P-R-O-C-E-E, right? Coming from. We can think of positive laws as proceeding from our having contracted into society, right? So those laws that come as a consequence of our having contracted into society, right? So positive laws are to be technical, contingent on this having contracted into society. The first thing that we recognize immediately, I don't want to take this too deep at this level, but the first thing that we recognize is that based on the society, the social structure that has been established, the political structure, the cultural structure that has been established, these positive laws will vary between states. And there are many other things that we can go through, but I don't want to get into that now. So basically, the only thing that you have to think of is, as I just said a couple minutes ago, pre-social setting, social setting. Positive laws come as a consequence of our having contracted into a social setting. When we look at natural laws, these laws are generally applicable. These laws apply, conceptually at least, a priori, throughout time. These laws were in place, though they couldn't be effectively enforced in a pre-social setting. They are in place in a social setting, and despite the variation among individuals within the social, right? Think about this as the global population, and here are different socio-political, cultural regions. Our positive laws will vary within each region for exactly the reason that I just said. Our general laws, natural laws rather, will be generally applicable throughout all of these. So that's the distinction. So to be technical, if you wanted to look at it like this, sort of circle, I don't want to get too complicated, would be our natural laws, sort of visually, and our positive laws will vary, right? Our positive laws, do the numbers. Right. Our positive laws will vary in the way and the manner in which these laws proceed from our social contract, right? So it's going to be socioculturally contingent, products of social construction, and so on. Okay, so that hopefully is clear. Next point, Locke writes the following, quote, we must consider what a state all men are naturally in, and that is a state of perfect freedom in order to order their actions. Let me read that again. Locke writes, quote, we must consider what a state all men are naturally in, and that state, and that is a state of perfect freedom to order their actions, right? So when we're talking about the natural law, we're saying that it's generally applicable in the idea here in Locke, and this is very, very general, but we want to make distinctions in the law, right? And we don't mean the law as political law, right? This is more of a law that defines human conduct, if you will, and our ability to express our liberty, which I erased, our autonomy. You can see that from a very conceptual level immediately, that various people will express that liberty, that self-actualization, that right to self-determination, I'm jumping ahead, differently. And this is where political institutions arise. But at this level, what we have to recognize, it's precisely because we have freedom, liberty, and freedom, I'm always forgetting all three, freedom, liberty, and equality as preconditions that we have to make sense of how this is going to apply globally to all people. Right? Remember, when we're talking about human rights, we want to make it universal, hence the term, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. All right. Immediately then, right at the beginning, and this goes on to page 24, but on page 18, we're at the middle of page 2 now. The right to revolt, right? This is pretty interesting. So I want to actually just read this piece in its totality, and we'll talk specifically about how this applies. Quote, such revolutions happen not upon every little mismanagement in public affairs, if a long train of abuses, provocations, and artifices, all tending the same way, make the design visible to people, and they cannot but feel what they lie under, meaning that the people see their oppression, and see whither they are going. It is not to be wondered that they should then rouse themselves and endeavor to put the rule into such hands which may, quote, secure to them the ends for which government was first erected. I have to stop there. When we contract into, right, and I don't want the lecture to get complicated right in the first hour, but, you know, it's immediately getting a little bit more difficult, but I'll work through it slowly. When we and this is the contract, as we said, and this is not a real paper contract, this is a conceptual idea, right? So when we transition from a pre-social to a social, we contract into the social. There is an obligation. Remember, we're talking about rights and duties. So if there is, and now you can see, I'll go a step even deeper, but I'll go slow. We said before that anytime we're talking about rights, we're also talking about duties. Right? Anytime I'm talking about rights, we're talking about duties. Remember, I talked about Agent M. So if Agent M has a right to X, then we'll talk about the state as having a duty, right? The state has a duty not to prevent Agent M from X. That's sort of the general template that we said. Hopefully I'm not going too fast. Okay. The government has a right to protect has an obligation rather to protect its people, right? If the people, as mass, contract into the social, well then the government, right, if they have the right, then the government has the duty. The people have the right, the government has the duty. right? If the people have the right